GOP County Chair. It's December 4th, 2019. With me is Dennis Tibbs, Pat Tibbs, James Spires, Bob Bagley, Larry Rogers, Del Fessenden, and David Smith. John, as we talked about, why don't you get us started with up to a 5-minute opening, and then we'll go around the table with Q&A.
Okay. Well, my name is Jon Bouche. I'm running for the office of chairman of the Montgomery County Republican Party. This was a position that has been filled by the same person for since 1964. So if you believe in term limits, it's probably about that time. I was born in New Orleans. I've been in Texas for 34 years, been in Montgomery County for about 14 and a half years. My wife Janine and I raised our 3 kids here in Montgomery County. My wife's a teacher. She works with deaf students, and she's a certified teacher. She used to teach at Oak Ridge Christian, and she's taught in several of the independent school districts in and around the area where she still does contract work there. I serve on the Lone Star Groundwater Conservation District, the Place 3 Director. I also serve as a Precinct 35 Chairman for the Republican Party right now, and I'm part of the steering committee for the Republican Party. I'm the former chairman of the Lone Star Christian Chamber of Commerce and one of the founders of that. I served as the chairman of the Freedom and Liberty Conservative PAC as well. And I've also done some work with the Montgomery County Tea Party, full disclosure. And did some consulting with the Patriots PAC a little bit at some point. I'm running for this position because I feel like I have the background to put some infrastructure and some succession planning in the party that's been badly needed for a long time. The party's very antiquated, and if you see what's going on in Texas right now, with Democrats gaining ground across the state, it's important to keep Montgomery County red. By 2017, 9 of the most populous, of the top 20 populous counties in Texas had already turned blue. When 9 Democrats filed to run in 2017 here in Montgomery County, a group got together and decided that we needed to do something about that to sort of stop the momentum. And so we made some changes to the Republican Party after we were elected and seated on the CEC. Unfortunately, in 2018, November, 4 more of those most populous counties turned blue. The fight was already going on here in Montgomery County at that point. The night of the November election, Montgomery County stayed red, and by a lot, we actually were able to hold serve and turn a lot more votes here in Montgomery County. So I'm running to continue that work because we desperately need to continue to modernize, energize, and unify this party if we are going to preserve our way of life for our families and for our posterity. That's why I'm running for Montgomery County Republican Party.
Great. Thanks for coming in. So one of the questions here was, when you leave office, what accomplishments do you want to be your hallmark, your legacy, and why? You answered, you want to have a well-defined party infrastructure and a solid bench of people who are active in the party and have a succession plan in place. Conservatives, both locally and nationally, have increasingly felt left out over the years by rhinos. Are you welcoming them back into the party while draining the swamp, basically?
Well, that's a good question. As far as welcoming them back in the party, what I've found here in Montgomery County is I reach out to people that a lot of them have been labeled rhinos just based on their associations. I mean, some of them are not. Some of the precinct chairs I've recruited are really, fair-minded, good people that have just been told wrong information by people that they know, like, and trust. So I'm very open-minded about who's coming into the party, but I'm also very cognizant of their past and what they're working on. I would like to have a party where everybody is putting their talents and abilities to work in the party for the benefit of the party. We have been very inclusive, as you know. We've had the door open for everybody to join. Our expectations were simple, that you're willing to follow the law and follow the rules of the party, and willing to participate in party initiatives to keep this county red. And of course, I sarcastically throw in that you're able to read and understand English, because apparently some of these people have demonstrated that they can't do that. But it's a very low bar. So am I including what we would call rhinos? I suppose I am, in the sense that I want everybody that's a Republican to be contributing to Republican efforts in this county. That doesn't mean we're going to agree on every single thing. But you're right, conservatives have been shut out for a long time, and I think we've done a lot to correct that.
David.
Yes, you know, I attended my first state convention a couple years ago, and I bought my book tonight, and in it identifies, you know, 5 top priorities, you know, Constitution here, et cetera, et cetera. But there's also planks in here, and it identifies 1,147 planks. And
There's not that many now.
I know, but there's a lot.
It's 330.
330? Yeah, my question is even 330 too many? Is there, it seems like when you went to the voting here that evening, that, you know, you kind of get lost in 1,147 you got to vote for, you know, and there wasn't much debate and no discussion, just a vote. Do you think it enhance the party if we put a cap on and force people to have a debate in these subcommittees to narrow it down? I think the 5 are great.
Sure.
You mean, you know, if it's 347 passed, I never knew what passed, but 1147 was
Okay, well, when you start, I've heard people say, I want to put the number of planks on one piece of paper. Then all of a sudden the party's too rigid. I'm glad there's a vigorous debate over the planks at the party, and I don't agree with all the planks necessarily. There are some that like to, as an example, to get rid of CPS. I think that's a mistake. I do know that we've had some problems in CPS. We've also had some problems with our police officers at times, but nobody talks about getting rid of police officers. So I think that serves a necessary purpose. So I'm not in favor of a plank that says get rid of CPS, for example. I think we need CPS reform. There's another plank that says get rid of funding for pro sports stadiums. I think that's a big government solution to a problem. I think if a community wants to come together and have a bond for a pro sports stadium in the area, that should be their decision as a community to do. I don't want an overreaching government saying, no, I don't want that. So is there a way to whittle the number of planks down? You know, David, I hope so, but the fact of the matter is that the convention got together, a group of people who were very passionate and thoughtful got together, and they were only able to get the number down to 330 something. And the next time we agree on all the planks, I think will be the first time. So.
Okay, you have, you made a statement in answers to one of the questions on the questionnaire that you want to unite the party because it had been divided, converting the party from a social club to a working party had been divided. From my perspective, it still is divided. And therefore unity becomes an issue. You definitely had a lot of good words about being a unifier, and certainly that is everybody's desire. You also said that you align with Tea Party on pretty much every issue, which then means that you tend to be a little bit more conservative than maybe most of those who claim to be Republicans. So what is your plan for bringing about that unity, for bridging that divide, making everybody in? You say you're welcoming to everybody, but does that necessarily mean that everybody has to think like you think?
No, that's a good question. The chairman should reflect the sense of the party. That's the responsibility of the chairman. So whatever the body votes on, that's what the chairman is supposed to represent. So for example, the current chairman we have, when the CEC passes a resolution against the CISD bond, and then the chairman says, we haven't taken a position on that, or when the CEC expresses anything that the chairman goes against that, I look at that as a violation of the chairman's responsibility. So as the chairman, regardless of my personal beliefs, it is my responsibility as a chairman to reflect the sense of the body as as a whole. Yes, the party was divided for a long time. It was divided because we have a chairman who had dictatorial powers, who treated it like a social club. People had their titles that they would cling to and tell you about them. And then we would never see any meetings. Nothing would ever get done. I remember in the organizational meeting on June 26th when the chairman said, we already have a committee for that, and one of our precinct chairs stood up and said, we do. And he said, well, of course we do. And he goes, well, I was just asking because I've been on that committee for 5 years and we've never met. So we're trying to unify the party in the sense that we're going to identify people's talents where they would best fit in to work in the committees, which we tried to do by nominating some of their people to the committees that time and getting them plugged in. Whereas before they would just appoint a friend to the deal that would never meet. They would stack the committee so you couldn't even have a quorum if you wanted to do something, and then you were just out of luck. So it will be a working party. It will be run in sort of a corporate sense where you build infrastructure. That's what I'm good at. That's what I've done my whole career.
Okay.
John, would you make a commitment tonight to not serve 55 years as a chairman?
I believe in term limits. That was one of the questions about, would you support term limits? And what is one of the questionnaires I answered somewhere else was, what do you think enough of a term limit is? Well, there's positions, as you know, Larry, that have a 4-year term, and should you serve 2 terms and that's it on that? There's some that have a 2-year term, so you're gonna serve 2 years on each one. I think it really depends on the position itself. You know, some of the judges that I think do a really good job, should they have a term limit? I don't know. I don't know if that's a fair thing to put them all on one. But if you had to hold a gun to my head and ask me about term limits, I would say 8 years is probably enough for anybody in any position.
Definitely not 55.
I will not be 109 serving on the deal. Maybe you can, Larry. You're going to be around.
Go ahead, Mal.
You put in here that you've been active in local politics for years, fighting for conservative values. Most people haven't heard about you except for the last couple of years when you ran for precinct chair, and that's been it. So other than fighting for conservative values, what have you done with the Republican Party over the past to try to not to unite it, but to build it and to work with it? And when did that start?
Well, when Steve Toth ran, I think it was 2014, I was at the polls kind of working, because I go to church with Steve, or I did at the time. When they started talking about building a highway past my house in 2015, I got a little bit more excited about it and really started hitting the polls. And if you remember during the Woodlands Township election, not a lot of people know this, but there was a video that went viral of a little flip chart that talked about sort of the future of what was going to happen and the 501c4 and everything. Actually, I created that video, and people were showing up at the polls saying, wow, I know about that. Now, and I know how to vote because of this chart. Now, as far as the Republican Party goes, I tried to get plugged in with the Republican Party probably in 2016, around there, and started calling my precinct chair who wouldn't return my phone calls. And so eventually, after asking around about it, somebody said, you know, you should just run for precinct chair. And that's how this whole adventure started, how I got involved in the Republican Party. So being involved in government, I consider it the central and highest priority of patriots to fight for smaller government and to fight against corruption in local government. So that was separate and apart from the party because I didn't feel like that was a central part of the Republican Party at all. I do think that level of integrity and ethics needs to come to the Republican Party, and I intend to do that when I'm elected.
Let's talk about the duties, not as currently delineated, excluding running primaries or elections, just day-to-day, year-to-year duties of the county chairman. we know that anybody could run as a Republican. I mean, they could be a die-hard Democrat. Beto himself could come here and file to run as a Republican. And no need to change that. Why would anybody want to change that? And here's the thing. Here we are sitting around this table, and this Tea Party that's helping the voters to assess candidates, to ask them questions and get their answers, even to score. And of course, we will do an endorsement or recommend. So my question is, why is it largely that work being done by the Republican Party? Better yet, why would, as you chairman, not do that type of work? Just with a proviso. Endorsement, recommend, I could see the party that's not a good idea. But scoring, say we score based on the platform, maybe all 3,345 to the fourth power planks, or let the committee that does vetting pick the top 10 or the top 20, and then based on elected officials, their voting record, based on new candidates, their questionnaires and interviews, that a score is provided, and then the party mail out information, a voter guide with the scoring, with doing a website where all this is posted for everybody to come and see. The Tea Party's doing it. Why not the Republican Party? That's my question, if you're a chairman.
That's a great question, and that is something that we need to focus on, and I think anybody on the CEC that has spoken with me and has heard me talk about this from the beginning will tell you that I'm very focused on candidate recruiting, which is what I spend a lot of my time doing, and candidate development, because we see it time and time again. We just had a candidate jump into the precinct 1 race who thought he was going to deliver speeches, that the crowd was going to be this adulation adoring him, and when he figured out that wasn't how it was, he dropped out. But he did sort of muddy the waters a little bit. So I think when candidates come to the Republican Party, just like we're endorsing and helping in nonpartisan races with known Republicans, I think we need to focus on finding good candidates, kind of stripping away some of the mystery and clutter about running, because it's very confusing to file and get your campaign finance and all that stuff done, to really sort of remove that fog and try and help fit candidates into where they fit into the party, and find the best candidates. One of the questions I got recently is, are you going to weaponize the party against Republicans you don't like? I'm like, well, no, but we are going to look for the best candidates that we can support, because I think the Republican Party brand is pretty important, don't you? I think it's very important. So I think we need to protect that brand, so we don't have Beto show up and say, I'm a Republican. And as our current chairman says, if they say they're Republican, I don't ask them what kind of Republican they are. I think it's a fair question to ask somebody what kind of Republican they are if they're not accepting.
Will the party
basic
provide
facts.
any information to the voters to help differentiate and them to make a decision for positions that have more than one candidate?
I would have to think about that, because you're going to get some subjectivity in place, and do you really
Sure.
want to do that if I'm not the chairman and tomorrow somebody else is a chairman? Are you really going to trust that with everybody to do that, James?
Well, that would be
Isn't that the problem we're having now?
that would be the executive committee, correct?
Right. And I would reflect the sense of the party if that's something they decided to
Well,
do.
the point was, doing nothing is what we have right now. And if it weren't for the Tea Party, the voters would be
You're
totally
right.
lost.
You're
They'd have these pay-to-play crap that you get in the mail, which is what I was getting before I joined the Tea Party and the executive committee. And it sounds like we're not going to improve the situation in the next 2 years. And I'm saying that needs to be improved. The voters should be able to look to the Republican Party for some kind of guidance, not for a decision, vote for this person, not for that, but some sort of guidance as to, here's where this person stands on the issues, here's what this person has done or not done on the issues, here's their record, all that kind of stuff. Information is what we're talking about. Education of the voter.
Well, I do I would push back a little bit to say we're not gonna do anything for the next 2 years, because I did say we're gonna identify good candidates, and we are gonna interview
Well,
them,
sure.
and get them to put forth the best candidates. As far as putting the best
Uh-huh.
information out there goes,
Yes,
you don't want that in the hands of a chairman. That's what we have now. They're saying,
right.
this is my cousin, he's really good. And well, are we, I mean, are we
If the
gonna?
executive committee wanted to do it, would you oppose it or support it?
I'm the chairman, I do what they say. That's the problem. It doesn't matter what I think. at that
So if the
point.
executive committee decides to do that type of
Yes.
assessment, you'll be an
Absolutely.
enabler, not a
Yes.
current, like we currently have an obstacle.
I would not be an obstacle, no sir.
Okay.
It's my job. Should I get elected?
Okay, along the same lines, at the state convention, we do pick a lot of platforms, and we also pick some pretty important legislative priorities.
Yep.
And generally speaking, the hundreds of elected officials we have, county commissioners, state legislators, senators, basically just ignore that. So would you be in favor of being a little more forceful, for instance, at the county level? Propose a resolution that demands that those people do what we ask. For instance, in the taxpayer-funded lobbying, would you demand that our commissioners sever ties with taxpayer-funded lobbyists, and our state senators and representatives do it? And you go further to post a wall of shame on the website and show what officials are just totally ignoring our legislative priorities?
I think it's a good question. Legislative priorities, they're called priorities and not preferences for a reason. There are priorities. So what I have proposed and what I've talked about is having this sort of sandwich approach to the legislative session. So I would like to bring these legislators into the CEC meeting and say, here are our legislative priorities, and review them with them to make sure that they understand. Because you get a whole lot of I didn't knows, misunderstood yous right now when they get to Austin. Now, to be fair to them, I've gone to Austin and I've observed the process and sort of dove into it because I wanted to really understand it better, to be fair to them. And it's not that they're sitting at the desk with a piece of paper deciding whether they're gonna bring it to the floor. There are thousands of bills crossing their desk, and there's a lot of moving parts. So not only is it a way to hold them accountable, Dennis, but it's also a way to support them. When they come back from the legislative session, bringing them before the CEC and saying what happened with the legislative priorities is a good way to do that. I have no problem with grading them out on how they achieve stuff, and it goes back to finding better candidates at the beginning. If we have somebody that just basically says, I did what I wanted to do because I was elected, I don't know if that sounds familiar to you, then we should look for a candidate that's gonna do their job. And I have no problem seeking better candidates who are gonna have a loyalty to their constituents and focus on the legislative priorities. I have no problem doing that.
So they do have thousands, but they usually only have 4, 5, 6, 7 priorities.
Again.
And for those 5 or 6 to be almost unconsidered in this last session is bad. We should get more from them.
Yeah, well, that's why I said we should meet with them before and meet with them after. So you review them.
And then post their name on the website.
I have no problem doing that either. I have no problem scoring them out. And actually, there's this Numbers 1, 2, 3 website that you were telling me about that scores all that out, that we could use a format like that. I've got no problem doing that. I think that's a great idea.
Can I add on to this one?
Yep.
So I was gonna ask the same question, but I was gonna do it strictly for county elected officials and not dealing with the state priorities, but still with the platform. For the county officials, elected officials that are not abiding by the platform and refuse to.
Yeah.
Are you willing to come forward and publicly address this with them and bring it out?
What do you think?
I'm just asking you for them.
I have been very vocal about it and have upset people about it. I think when 95% of your constituents or some number thereof vote against toll roads and you say you're getting a toll road anyway, I think that's a problem. When 93% of the people in your district say we do not want a Woodlands Parkway extension and you're trying to figure out a way to do it anyway, I think that's a problem. So, yeah, nothing, in microcosm, do we have a problem at the county level with this? Of course we do. We need better candidates. I'll give you a great example, it's going on right now in precinct 1. If you were to sit down and write down what you wanted in a precinct 1 commissioner, you would want somebody that has a resume of someone like a Billy Graff. He's congressional awards, disaster relief, multi-million-dollar nonprofit, Marine, pastor, family man. He's got the full resume. And on the other side of the balance sheet, you have runs a feed store, cousins in office. Okay?
It has money.
Yeah, it has money. And unfortunately, and they're both really nice guys, but the problem we have is when I'm putting together my basketball team, do I want good guys or do I want good players? So I don't live in precinct 1, but I know where my vote would be. But this is something that the party should be doing and putting that information out and focusing, because we want excellence in government. We need good people representing us. We don't have that right now in certain parts of county government. And I know I'm gonna get a lot of grief from people for saying that, but it's just the truth, and it's the same thing I've been saying since I've been involved in politics for a while. So they're not hearing anything that they don't know about me already.
So are you suggesting that there be like the Republican Party put out a comparison chart between the two candidates, even though they're both Republicans?
I do think it's fair to quote people's bona fides so the voters know. I think that's a fair profile to put up online, to say that. And it's also fair to let the candidates comment on that, to speak up to what qualifies them for the job.
Yeah. Okay, so more of a league of right voters than the leftist league of women voters, right?
I'm not touching that.
Okay. Okay, a couple of years ago, a resolution was put forth by the GOP to institute a 20% homestead exemption. You indicated that you did support that, as well as establishing some oversight and reform for our appraisal board. Right now, the appraisal board is appointed. Is electing them the better way to go? And is that the type of reform that's needed?
I think the type of reform that's needed is going to have to come through the legislature. I think we need to lock in home values, at least for some demographics. I don't think it's fair to be taxing people out of their houses. Steve Toth sent out some tweet a while back that said, his home value increased by 40-something% over a 5-year period or something crazy like that. And if that's what the appraisal board is able to do, then they should all be financial investors, because that's a great return on investment, isn't it? So some of these home values are greatly inflated, and I've always had a problem as a conservative knowing that I don't own my home. I think I own my home, but let me miss a tax payment and see what happens. So I think there needs to be some reform in that for sure. I think an elected appraisal board would be fine, but again, I think the bulk of that work needs to be done at the legislature to level out and nail down home appraisals and limit that a lot more than just turning it into a situation where, hey, look, more people moved here, we raised up the appraisal rates, we'll claim that we're doing the effective tax rate, and look at all this extra money we got, what are we gonna do with it? Because this is what's been happening in this county for a while.
I don't want to go into the appraisal issues, because I don't think we should have property taxes at all. That's what we fought the War of Independence for.
That's a popular position. I get it.
But to go along with the question that was asked, and I want to compare this to Lone Star groundwater, do you not feel that by the legislature making it possible for Lone Star groundwater conservation district to now have elected positions versus appointed positions, do you not see that it made a big difference? And do you not think that that same thing could take place by having an elected appraisal board if we have to continue on with property taxes?
I'm not against an elected appraisal board at all. I was just saying that the bulk of it needs to happen in the legislature.
I
Just
understand
like-
that,
Yeah.
but did it make a difference with Lone Star becoming elected versus appointed?
Oh, it certainly has.
Okay, so do you not feel that there's a possibility that that same dynamic could take place with?
Sure,
Okay,
sure, of course it could.
thanks.
Yeah, or Dave, sorry.
There's been some discussion about whether the precinct chairs should be election judges. And if they're not, then the party still has to provide another 100 other people to do that. You can't rely upon the county employee to choose the judge. The party has to choose the judge. So what are your thoughts about how to balance that? Or do we have the precinct chairs continue, or we set up a separate organization to be election judges?
I don't think we should tell precinct chairs they can't be election judges. If they want to do it, I think that's fine. I would rather have a Republican Party precinct chair that wants to be an election judge being an election judge than one that doesn't being forced to be an election judge. I think the way we fix the problem is we grow the party, and we've been doing a very good job of getting more volunteers to come in. Some of them have asked me, they said, how do I become an election judge? Well, I'm very excited to hear that because we need election judges. So that's how you do that. I think you grow the party, you get more volunteers that want to do this. I think the precinct chair's primary job should be outside engaging the voters outside the 100-foot line, giving the voters the information that they need and promoting Republican priorities and principles, as opposed to being locked in a room behind a computer where they can't say anything and their phone is off. So that's how we're going to fix that problem, is to get more people locked in.
So the second question, what about separate Democratic Republican primaries? You know, separate the two, let them run ours. You run ours, they run theirs. It's not an issue right now because there's only one Democratic precinct. But
Well, I'm a fiscal conservative. You know, as long as we have our people in there monitoring and kind of running the process, I don't have a problem with a joint primary because it saves many thousands of dollars for the taxpayers of this county. If it ever does become a problem where I think that there's the potential for some corruption, we could look at that again, but I think right now having the joint primary is the most fiscally conservative thing to do, and I think it's fine right now.
Okay, I don't know how much time being the party chair is going to take. I'm sure you have given that great thought, and it's probably going to mean that there's some other things you're going to have to step away from. So how much time do you think it's going to take to do the job that you envision doing, and what is it that you're going to lay by the wayside in order to do that?
I have already resigned as chairman of the Lone Star Christian Chamber of Commerce. I have ceased all activity with the Freedom and Liberty Conservative PAC. I've stepped off the Citizens Budget Committee to a large degree. I have already done a lot of that, taken a lot of those things off my plate. It's a 2-year term for the county chair. I will run that. As you know, I was looking for someone to run this party because I wanted somebody that could bring the party together. And at the end of the day, the consensus from the people that I talked to was I was the right guy to do this. So I will serve my 2 years, and at the end of 2 years, we'll see what it looks like. And if I'm gonna run for those another 2 years, then if I'm the right candidate, then we'll do that. But I'm not going in this thing thinking, man, I'm gonna be the county chair of this party for the next 10 years, you know, and build up my little kingdom. No, I'm gonna put the infrastructure in place, like I said. We're gonna build a team, we're gonna have great success, and at the end of 2 years, if people want me to run for this again, and it looks like it's the right thing for the party, then I'll do that.
Okay, and you did $60 word infrastructure. That was kind of a follow-on question of mine.
Yeah.
Can you be a little bit more specific what you envision included in infrastructure and what you are some specific targets?
Oh, yeah, I've got a whole list of them right here that I've been, every day when I sit there and think about things to do with the party, I'm always jotting them down. So, I mean, the committees are a really important part of party infrastructure because you're able to parcel that out and manage it at a different level without having to micromanage everything. You have people that are talented in certain areas. So that's one example of infrastructure. We're going to formalize the area chair program. That's another thing. We got 100 precincts. We got 10 area chairs. So instead of me trying to coordinate with 100 precincts all across the county, I could have a conference call with 10 area chairs and say, hey, I'm looking at this scorecard online for what you guys are accomplishing in your area, which is another thing that I've been talking to Bill Brez about. And I'm noticing that you got 3 precincts that are not doing this or not doing that, or you have some vacancies here. You have some vacancies here. What are you doing to fill those? Do you need some help? And that, so I'm having 10 people manage it. So we're putting another level in to help manage this thing that's been unmanageable. If I had to describe the infrastructure of the party now, I'd say there is none. People rarely, when I came to the first CEC meeting, I think it was like 20 people there maybe, wasn't a whole lot. And
You're
now,
referring to before
right,
last year,
right,
June 28th.
that's right. And then since then, we've been averaging about, what, 70?
Yep.
So the infrastructure is very important, Dale, because if people don't have it, and we're even seeing some of this now, because we're trying to change a culture here in this party. Okay, we have people call it a social club, people call it a do-nothing culture. I've heard it called a lot of different things, and unfortunately, it's true. We have a lot of people that don't even bother to show up to the meetings. You know, nobody knows them in their area because they don't do anything. They don't knock doors. They don't return calls. They don't participate in anything with the party. The reason they don't do that is because nobody calls them and says, "What's going on? Why aren't you doing this?" We're missing that. We need that. I think the area chairs are going a long way to fixing that. I think the committees are an important part of that as well. Identifying the priorities within the party, having the right committees assigned to that, and actually managing those committees. We don't have that right now.
What, I'd like to insert again, excuse me.
No, just take it over.
When you say we don't have it right now, since last June of 2018, there has been a lot of activity and volunteers and committees.
True.
Could you expand on that a little bit?
I will.
What you're saying is,
I will.
we don't have it now, but
Fair
yes,
enough.
we do.
We have it, but it's not working like it needs to work. I mentioned we're trying to change a culture. So I won't call anybody's name out, but there was one person that wanted to be on a committee, and they said, I can run this, I've got all the experience doing it. Over and over, we've tried to push them into doing it, and they just won't do it. So we're having to work around them to get other people to do it. It's gonna take time to change this. And it's not that the person doesn't have the ability to do the job, it's that they've never been expected and they've never been held accountable to do the job. And this person even told me, John, you're trying to hold volunteers accountable to do the job and you just can't do it. No, sir, you're wrong. We are gonna hold them accountable because they volunteered for the job. It's a little thing called integrity, and we're gonna make sure that we get the right people in there, so.
On our questionnaire, it has, please list 3 federal agencies that are popular in our culture and should be abolished. And you listed Department of Education, Department of Homeland Security, and Department of Agriculture. Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
Willis ISD for the first one. Do I need to say anything else? Our public education system has become an indoctrination tank where teachers have a captive audience in which to inculcate our children with their socialist views. Education should be localized, and the money that should follow the kid. I think that's a really important thing, so people can vote with their feet and their dollars. So that's on that one. On the Department of Agriculture, their practices are antithetical to a free market system. With the price fixing and the subsidies, we're paying people to not grow food. We're manipulating the price market to inflate sugar prices that benefit certain sectors of the market. All that needs to stop. That's also the agency that's over our food stamp program. I think you need to move them to Health and Human Services, audit that program, and fix it. And eventually, I would like to put it back to where it was, to where it's got the basics that people need to live, and they're not going into the store buying filet mignon and everything else with it. So that's on that one. And the last one was Homeland Security. Do you feel like you still have the same amount of freedom that you should have from many years ago? Has Homeland Security enriched your life at all? I don't think so. It's a lot of redundancy in programs. It was sold to the American people as a need. out of fear, because they said there wasn't enough communication between the departments. So of course you create a whole new bureaucracy, right, that invades everyone's privacy. I think that needs to go away. I don't think TSA is really beneficial. That needs to be privatized. So yeah, I think those, we already got the FBI, we already got the CIA, we've already got a lot of federal agencies that are doing this sort of stuff, and then you drop Homeland Security in, which I think it's been a disaster with the Patriots Act and everything else. So.
Okay.
So we talked a little bit about your role and what you're going to be doing. Do you feel it would be important for you to be out raising money for the local party, for the county party, and working with businesses as well as elected officials in doing so? And do you feel that the party should be supporting the elected officials and helping them financially if possible, rather than all the elected officials paying for the party?
I have always felt like the party should be supporting the officials and getting out the vote. I've never felt like the officials should be propping up the party. I think you start to get into a quid pro quo thing, and you start compromising the values of the party and the brand of the party when you do that. I think the money will come if you are demonstrating to the business community that you serve a purpose and that you're actually doing something to protect their interests as well. And that has to do with the party platform. I mean, if you owned a business, would you donate to the party right now? No. In fact, there's a corporate account that is used for the back-end operation of the party. You know how much money is in that account? A big flat zero. So there is already not a corporate buy-in, a business buy-in. So my job as a county party is to carry our message to these business owners and instill in them a confidence in our competence to keep this county red, and that will protect their interests, because they have a vested interest in us maintaining this county and getting away from the socialist scourge that's spreading across this country.
Speaking of organization, currently the party is being run just the same it was, well, except for the new bylaws, but if the county chairman had his way, it'd be running the same way it was when the population of this county was 41,000.
Yeah.
Now, we're already fast approaching 1 million, hundreds of thousands of voters. Now, I've done neighborhood walking, not now of course, but knocking on doors, phone calls. I just don't find that effective in most of the county, because one, people aren't home, two, their doors are 300 feet away from the gate, that kind of stuff. And phones, everybody just about has cell phones, and numbers change all the time. So my question is this: what do you consider to be the duty of the precinct chair? Currently it's not much. We go to the CEC meetings, we may sit on committees. There are needed to find duties with regard to working with our own community. Now, I've always considered it that we should be a resource to our community, but then the problem is communication. How do we let them know I'm available if you need help with this quagmire we call the federal government, the state government, and the local government? Why isn't the precinct chair there to work with elected officials to help a citizen, at least get them in the door, where then the elected official can do what they're supposed to do? What do you see the duties that you would like the CEC to give to the precinct chair, and what will you do to enable their ability to communicate with their voters in their precinct?
I do think block walking is still effective. I think face-to-face is important. I asked the precinct chairs to do 3 things. And again, I'm not the chairman, I'm on the steering committee, and I can only wield the influence of my personality and ask people to do stuff. But I asked them to do 3 things. I asked them to make sure they had the Current Advantage app, their walk list loaded on their personal device. I asked them to find someone in their precinct that they can work with as an assistant just to help them. and I asked them to get me 20 contacts we could add to our database, because I'm not real good with math, but it sounds like 100 times 20 is 2,000 more people to me that we could add to our database. You know how many of them did it? None. I didn't get it from any of them. So this is again, it goes back to that culture problem. Now, when I became a precinct chair, I had the same thoughts you had, James. I said, how do I get the word out? How do I let people know I'm here? So the
Right.
first thing I did was I put up a Facebook page that said Jon Bouche, Precinct 35 Chairman.
Sure, but that
And-
takes
And started inviting
advertising,
people.
right?
Well, no, I go on back on next door and I start putting information in. Hey, I'm the Precinct 35 Chairman here in Oak Ridge North. If you have any questions about election? I put election updates on there, and I just became the source of information for the area to where everybody knew my name.
Well, what about the county party using the funds that it raises to advertise? We're not talking about expensive stuff. We're talking about geographically targeted, whether it be Facebook or there's a bunch of different media platforms
Right.
that let people know in our area, oh, here's a little ad, we're here to help, something like that. I don't know.
I will have a webcast for the chairman that will air every week. We'll certainly do that to update people. on
Will you advertise that?
Yes, we will. It'll be on social media. I would expect every precinct chair to have their own page. I would expect every precinct chair to have an assistant they're working with. I would expect every area chair to be coordinating with those things to make sure they're happening, because we have to get our message out. And there's no other way to do it right now. You're right, social media is the way to do it.
Right.
And I was shocked and appalled that in the county of 570,000, we thought, the old party, that 1,000 or so likes on Facebook was wonderful. Goat Yoga has more hits on their Facebook page. That's not wonderful. We need to do a better job of expanding our social media presence and being a more technologically savvy party in order to get people, the younger people, involved in this. And that's something I've been doing a lot of, is hitting these younger people up and saying, hey, we want to bring you in, and trying to connect them with the young Republicans, because those are the ones that know how to do this stuff.
So quickly, when you propose a budget to the CEC, will you include in that budget appropriate funds for social media presence, that kind of thing?
I will include in the budget whatever the committees tell me they need, and the CEC will vote on that.
Okay.
We have time for a couple more questions. Don't knock my yoga class, man.
Okay, in the questionnaire related to the federal income tax, you mentioned a preference for the fair tax,
Yep,
which has its own detractors.
sure.
Do you think the prebate needs to be tweaked, and how would you address that? That's the biggest objection, I think.
It's not just the prebate for me, it's the possibility. Imagine well, first of all, the fair tax is a consumption tax, right?
Right.
It's embedded into the manufacturing of goods, just so we're all on the same page here. So imagine now a legislator comes in and says, we're gonna go ahead and do a carve out for this particular industry. Is that fair? But you can see it happening. It's not fair.
Sure.
And the deals, and this will be used as collateral up in Washington, well, I'll sign off on your bill if you give us a carve out for this particular industry, which means so much to my area. That's why I said it needs to be, everybody needs to be under the same rules. Any system can be manipulated. So, I just think the fair tax is the way to go. If it's embedded and it is across the board and there's no carve outs or anything, I think that's the right way to do it. I don't think there's a perfect way anyway. Somebody's always
The
gonna-
main problem with it is it doesn't
Rebate.
do away with the IRS, because every person in the country gets a monthly check from the IRS.
Well, I don't like the prebates at all. I think consumption tax is, in the raw form of just a consumption tax, is the way to go, because if I go buy a Porsche, I'm gonna pay more than the guy buying a Corolla. I mean, it makes it fair, thus the name. And when they started muddying it up with all these, prebates and carve-outs, because people were saying, well, it's not fair to this person because they can't afford a Porsche, and so they're not getting as big a benefit, that's where it gets muddy.
What carve-outs for food, groceries, drugs?
We've already got all those. In fact, the benefit would be, we've already got a system, a sales tax system, already carves out milk and bread and rice.
So we do carve-outs, you're saying? John?
Well, for staple stuff, I suppose I don't have a problem with that, but again, you go back to
That's how
the.
it gets started.
You're right, that's the nose of the camel under the tent, but like he said, it's already in place for staple foods, but I think when we got away with food stamps when they first came out, there was a limited number of things you could get on them, right?
Sure.
That's changed tremendously, under the interest of fairness, under the umbrella of fairness. I don't think that should be, it should be a hand up, not a way of life. How many of you have been in line at Walmart and you see the people reach in their Dooney and Burke purse and pull out their card and, you know, with all their jewelry on, and says, drive you crazy with their brand new iPhone? It drives me
Pay
crazy.
for the caviar.
And go out and get in their Lexus, you know?
Yeah.
It drives me crazy. That needs to be audited, it needs to be fixed.
Quick confirmation question. Differences between you and an opponent, you only have one so far, still 5 more days to go, I guess. You said that, of course, you've been involved, you've talked about your involvement with the party, but your opponent has never attended a CAC meeting or a county executive committee meeting or an MCRP function that you're aware of. Is that still the case since you filled this out?
What was it last night's executive
No,
committee
it's
meeting?
not. I don't know really much about the guy, except for he is the husband of a political consultant who also serves as Charlie Riley's campaign manager. And she's also the founder of the Republican Voters of Texas PAC, and apparently has something to do with this new group calling themselves the Southwest Tea Party that popped up out of Magnolia. So again, they're gonna play games with the voters on election day and run this game on them and fool voters into thinking that they're the Republican Party or a Tea Party. That's all I really know about the guy. I'm pretty confident he's gonna get the endorsement of his wife's PACs. But that's all I can tell you.
Time for one more question.
I got a real quick one to end this on. On our questionnaire, we asked, is there anything in your background of embarrassing nature that should be explained before this election? Arrest or conviction, bankruptcy, and you said no. You've got a great band, and I've seen it several times, and I think it's really entertaining. When you wear that Elvis Presley suit, is that not embarrassing?
You know,
No.
it's funny, because early on in this political adventure, I had some guy sent me a message on Facebook or whatever that said, if you don't do what I want you to do, I'm gonna post stuff that's gonna embarrass you. And I said, have you ever seen my band play? You can't embarrass me. And you know, look, I am an entertainer. I like doing that. I've done it my whole life.
And you're good at it.
I like to bring a smile to people's face. And, you know, the other night when we were leaving that event at the CEC meeting, I mentioned this before the cameras were on, but you noticed all of our people were smiling and we're all lighthearted because we are happy warriors. We believe in what we're doing. And this is important to us because we understand that we're doing this for our families and so forth. And the other side, these people are very dour and angry all the time. And when Shelley Sekula Gibbs was running for the Woodlands Township here, when I first met her, and she won't mind me sharing this, when I first met her, she made the comment, you know, what y'all did to Chairman Wilkerson was wrong. And this is the first time I met her, and I said, explain what you mean by that. She goes, well, I saw the video of y'all shouting him down. And I said, well, you know, the video, you need to go watch it again, because I just stood up in an even voice and I said, you know, as a point of order, this agenda has not been approved by the CEC, and he said, you can leave if you want to, but we're gonna go on, which was an abuse of the chair. She has been plugged in with the Republican women here in the area for throughout this whole time. But after the election, she called me to thank me for all the work we did for her in helping her get elected. And I said, now I want to ask you something. I want you to be honest with me. Throughout this whole process, did the people who were the biggest critics and complaining about the bylaws and so forth, did one of them knock one door, make one phone call, or work at the polls, or do anything to help you get elected? And she said no. And so we're opening eyes. People see what's happening. So we are a happy group. There's nothing I'm going to be embarrassed about on this, except occasionally I may really slip up and tell somebody the way I feel about something. That can be embarrassing a bit at times, because I have a tendency to maybe be a little cutting with my words at times. But I'm working on that. It's something that I'm aware of. But I appreciate the question.
All right, well, sounds good. We've come to that point where if you want to close it out, you have up to 5 minutes and then we'll wrap it up.
Okay. Well, I do appreciate you guys giving me the opportunity to talk to you today. What you guys do is very valuable to the county. I think people deserve to know a little bit more about the people that are being elected or that they're considering voting for. Election integrity is a huge thing for me. I think it's very important. That's why I'm so vocal about these pop-up PACs that show up. You guys have a very solid history behind you. I know each of you on a level that I don't know these other people, but I know what your principles are, and that's why in my questionnaire I said I very much align with the Tea Party, and I do. But we have some challenges in this county, and just like the Democrats with these PACs, like the Republican Voters of Texas PAC and this other fake Tea Party, and that they keep running this game on the voters. I think it's dishonest, and that's why I would co-authored the resolution against the dishonest electioneering of the Republican Voters of Texas PAC. If elected chair, I will do all I can to put that information on the website about these affiliate groups, which ones are real, which ones are have an ulterior motive. I mean, just in that instance of that PAC, their stated goal up front was we voted unanimously to oppose anyone who supports the new bylaws or voted for the new bylaws, but then they show up at the polls and say, we're advocating for the most conservative candidates. That's what we call a lie in the business, and we need to take a stand about that. So I'm running for county chair because I want to bring integrity to the party. I do want to bring the party together. I want the party to have meaning again. When I first announced that I was going to run for this, I won't say the name, but a person came to me and said, why are you running for this? That's a meaningless position. That party does nothing. I said, that's why. Because it should not be a meaningless position. The Republican Party in Montgomery County should be the party that every other party in Texas looks to as the example of what it is to have a strong Republican Party. And if I'm elected, that's exactly what we will be.
All right, sounds good. Thanks very much for coming in. Appreciate
Stop
your
recording.
time tonight. Good luck in your campaign.
Appreciate it.